Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is day 28 of our 31 Days Parenting Challenge. Thank you, everyone, for joining me again. Are you here? Thank you so much for joining. All right, it's always an exciting time here with you. Okay, so what are we talking about? This is day 28. What are we talking about today? Does your child's inner child need healing? I don't know how many persons are excited about this topic, but I am so excited about this particular topic. So if you are here, please let me see you. Let me see your comment. Let me see you. I want to be sure that you can hear me. Okay, so if you have not subscribed to my channel, if you're new, please subscribe to my channel. All right. I also have pages on Facebook and Instagram. Please follow, like, and share. Thank you so much. So, our previous sessions, right, have been about asking our children questions, getting feedback from them, a lot of the time. Okay, but today, I feel like it's more like, yes, we'll ask questions, ask our children questions, ask our teenagers questions, but I feel like this will benefit every aspect of the family, you, the child, the teenager, the young adult, those that are intending to get married or to have children. It will benefit every group. Okay, so we're talking about the inner child. Does your child's inner child need healing? Now, the inner child is a psychological idea, right? Used to describe previous versions of you that still exists within you. All right? The childlike aspect of every adult. So we always have a childlike aspect that wants to express itself. Thank you. I can see your comment. That would love to express itself, but a lot of times is held back by certain things, which we're going to talk about today. So those feelings, those memories, those experiences from our childhood that continues to influence our thoughts, that continues to influence our decisions, that continues to influence our behaviors, continue to influence our emotions and our reactions in a lot of cases is what the inner child is. So as we grow, we'll discover that there is a lot of connection between what we do in the present and what happened to us or with us while we were growing up. So many persons just react a certain way because of a certain experience they had as they were growing up. In fact, there's something called the subconscious mind, which builds up especially from 0 to 7, 0 to 10 years, where we absorb. Montessori calls it the absorbent mind, right? That period, that phase in life where we absorb things like sponge, we take it in, and as we grow up, we keep experiencing things and letting out things. So that is what happens a lot of the times. Your past experiences and upbringing, right, can create a pattern. A lot of times mimic what it is that happens to you, right? So your past experiences and your upbringing can create a pattern and shape how you react in the present, shape how you react to situations, how you react in relationships, in friendship, in your workplaces. So that is what we want to talk about today. A lot of the time, right, you find out that you mirror your 5-year-old, your 10-year-old experience. We're going to get deep into that. Now, but before we go in, I want you to know that God's original plan for childhood is to be characterized by childlikeness. That is what God intends, right? For everyone, that our childhood be characterized by childlikeness. But yes, childlikeness like playfulness, spontaneity, innocence, that fun-loving nature, that creativity, right? That comes with growth. God wants us to experience all those things in our childhood. In fact, a lot of times, God wants us. I remember reading Matthew chapter 18, verse 3. All right, that reminds us that He said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of God." So God expects us, even in our adult stage, or in our adult ages to be like children, all right, to have that childlikeness in us continuously. So there shouldn't be a limit to that fun loving, to that playfulness, to that imaginative, and that sense of trust that every child just naturally has for their parents. All right, the inner child of our children and teenagers should reflect the inherent goodness, the inherent creativity, the intrinsic abilities, fun-loving nature, innocence that God has originally planned for the child. But the problem now is that a lot of times this inner child has been tampered with. Okay, this inner child is tampered with on so many levels. All right, we're going to talk about some of the things that tampers with it. So what we understand, or what we should know right now, is that a lot of our children, right, already have inner child wounds even in their childhood. This is the thing that this is the dangerous part of inner child wounds. When our inner child, that purity, that capacity to love, the capacity to be loved, capacity to love and be loved, right? Every child has that capacity, the ability to be loved, and they receive love wholeheartedly, like awesomely, happily. Okay, but by the time we get to a point where it is difficult for us to accept love or to feel love, then that inner child has been tampered with. Every child has a capacity for honesty, for authenticity, but when it's tampered with, then that child has a wound which we call inner child wound, and which is what we do not want for our children. And like I said, unfortunately for us, a lot of our children have that inner child wound. Sadly, inner child wounds are emotional and psychological traumas, unmet needs that we experience in our childhood. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the different inner child wounds, right? But we should know that they are like unmet needs, traumas, things that ordinarily we would have gotten, but we couldn't get because of the ignorance or the inadequacies of our parents or our caregivers or whoever we had around at that time when we were growing up. And unfortunately, a lot of our children have these unmet needs. A lot of our children have these inadequacies. A lot of our children have these traumas right now. They're experiencing these traumas. And unfortunately, if it is not worked on, if it is not treated, if there is no intervention, they will end up growing up with these wounds, with these hurts, and it will affect their life on a very large level, right? Which a lot of the times is not always pleasant. So it can manifest in our behaviors, in our approach to life, approach to relationships, approach to life in general. All right, it can affect every area of their life. Now, what are these inner child wounds? Inner child wounds are like those adverse child experiences that we had, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And as we're talking about it, I want you to reflect on your own self, because I said it's not just about the children, it's also about finding healing ourselves, right? I want you to reflect on your own self, on your own life, and think about your child. All right, think about the experiences they may be having if they fall into any of this category. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is abandonment wound. Abandonment wound. That's physical or emotional absence of a parent, right? That feeling of neglect. Unfortunately, a lot of our children might be feeling the same way. All right, a lot of us felt the same way, felt that neglect, felt that abandonment. Now, when I talk about neglect, don't think I'm talking about always being around. You can be in the house, but actually not be present. So abandonment and absence could be that you are present, but your mind is not with them. All right, you are present, but they don't feel your presence in the actual sense. So when I'm talking about neglect, don't think too far. Are you actually present for your children? Are you actually there for them? Do they feel your presence? Because there's a certain level of presence, there's a certain amount of presence our children should have every day to make them feel that emotional connection. But unfortunately, so many of our children do not have that. Yes, so many of our children do not feel that connection. So neglect could be failure to provide basic needs. Now, a lot of parents feel that when we talk about basic needs, it's just about food, shelter, and all that. That is included. All right. So many children faced abandonment while they were growing up. They couldn't get basic amenities. So it's also part of inner child wound. It's also part of abandonment. But some of us feel okay, we are giving our children, we are providing for them. But aside from the physical provisions, do you provide emotional needs? Do you give them your attention? Do you give them your time, your presence? So that is what that abandonment need. Do they feel your emotional support? A lot of times, a lot of our children are having or are facing some form of challenges, and they may not even bring it to us. So it means that emotionally, you are not supportive enough, right? There's been a breach of that support. So when they grow up, what happens is that they feel invisible, right? They do not feel loved. They feel um, a form of lack of low self-esteem, rather. They do not feel, they feel invisible. That's why a lot of times, even as adults, because of that neglect, because of that abandonment, we act like we don't want to bother anybody. That is how that is what happens. That's the impact of that. We don't want to bother anybody, even when we are in dire need of something, right? We rather suffer and try to struggle to get it on our own when we can, in the actual sense, just ask, right? Or just ask for help. We act like, oh, I don't need anybody, I can do it on my own. That abandonment makes children independent so early. It's not a bad thing, but when their independence is a result of neglect, of abandonment, it becomes an issue because they begin to feel like they can do things on their own, like they should always depend on themselves. No human should have that whole load of depending on themselves all alone. We are independent beings. We should learn to ask for help. We should learn to reach out to others. So that is what that particular inner childhood does to our children. So is your child feeling neglected? Is your child feeling abandoned? Right? Another thing we'll look at is abuse wound. Abuse wound. All right? Physical abuse. Last year we had a session on discipline. I hope everyone was there. All right? We learned so much about how to help our children, how to discipline our children, how that discipline is not just about punishment and raising your hand to hit, but a lot of our children do not understand what we are doing with them when it comes to discipline, right? They know that you're trying to correct them, but somehow at the back of their mind, they are wondering, is this just correction, or is this wickedness? Is this an ordinary correction, or is it that I did something so like sometimes the punishment or the discipline we give to them, if I let me not say discipline, the punishment we give to them, so a lot of the time is not even proportional to what they did. So discipline is not something we're going to talk about right now. It's a full lesson on its own. But I want you to know that if your child feels this inadequacy, they grow up and it impacts their life on so many levels. These things are not even far. Because recently I had, some time ago, I had a conversation with children, right? Children in my church between 8 and 10. And we're talking about forgiveness. So at the point I raised a question on whether they can forgive their parents if they do this, if they can tell their parents some things. And they said, no, I can't tell my parents things. So we started talking about how they discipline, what the kind of disciplines they get from their homes. All right. Someone talked about my mom rubs pepper all over my body before she flogs me. Right? Someone says my dad. Now we're talking about abuse, right? There are different types of abuse: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Okay, I think we're going to treat all side by side or just one at a time. But I want to talk about the fact that a parent will send their child out there One said, my dad tells me to just go outside for the whole day as a form of punishment. So what do you think happens to the child, the mind of that child? Because that child will not feel any sense of safety, any sense of security around you, because they will feel that you can do anything to them. If you can send them out of the house the whole day, right? If you can send them out of the house, roaming around, doing all sorts of things the whole day, just as a form of punishment, then that sense of security is cut off from them. You cut off that sense of love and safety and security from them. All right. Then we're going to talk about the verbal abuse, the words that we say to our children. Are they seasoned enough? Are they seasoned? See, you need to hear what parents say to children, everything. And then later we're going to start wondering, how did you learn this kind of thing? Meanwhile, we say all sorts of things to them. Are you stupid, idiot? Call them all sorts of things. In fact, sometimes even when we don't label them, we insult them, like the kind of insults we rain on them. They themselves wonder, like, is this even my parent? Right? Sometimes they may not even think about it in that time, but this is why it is called inner child. As they grow up, sometimes those words begin to come back to them. They begin to start thinking about them, and it affects. You see that they find it difficult even confronting others, because they feel, oh, if I start this confrontation, if I start this conversation, the person might start insulting me. All right, there are certain times that we need to confront people, ask questions, okay, make inquiries. But so many persons are unable to do that because of this inner child wound. The criticisms, every little thing, we are criticizing them. So when they grow up, they also begin to criticize others. And even if they are criticizing others, they find it difficult to accept or to take or receive criticisms. So is your child being emotionally abused? Are you abusing your child emotionally? All right. So it affects them on the long run. So many of us parents, we are manipulators. We manipulate them. We gaslight them. We gaslight them. All right. So we have to ask yourself, do I have this gaslighting behavior as a parent? Where sometimes our children will start to question themselves. They keep telling you the truth, but you do not believe them. So they question themselves, like, is there something wrong with them? So the last one we talk about on abuse is sexual abuse. Some of our children are facing issues with sexual abuse, right? Some of us had issues. They said 3 out of every 4 children have had issues, if not actual contact. Some of them have attempted sexual abuse issues. So some of us looking at me or watching me right now had that experience. Unfortunately, we've not been able to speak to anyone. Unfortunately, our children may be having that, but they've not been able to speak to anyone. So imagine what happens with them when they grow up. Imagine how difficult it would be for them to build relationships, for them to build marriage relationships, or even friendship relationships. So another one is rejection wound, where they feel rejected, criticized, and then they grow up feeling the fear of rejection. So what category do you think your child is in? All right. Have you betrayed the trust of your child before? Have they trusted you for something? And then have you betrayed their trust before? It will wound them on so many levels, and this trauma is something that will now require time, a long time to heal, a long healing process. Some of us are going about finding it difficult in life because of inner child wounds. So, as I'm talking to you, reflect on yourself. Do you have inner child wounds that need healing? All right. I'm just going to list out all the adverse childhood experiences that that are there. Right. We have the parental separation or divorce. If your parents have had issues with divorce or separation, it is an inner child wound. All right. Witnessing domestic violence, having a family member who has been taken to prison, right? Who have been incarcerated, taken to prison, living with a family member that is an alcoholic. All these things are things that can bring havoc to our lives in our adulthood. So a lot of times you see people reacting a certain way, you see people acting a certain way, getting aggressive, angry. In fact, unfortunately, some of these things are linked to depression, to normal real health challenges like cancer and all that, because they are confused what is going on with them. They are confused because whenever they react, they are reacting based on the experience they have had in their childhood. They are reacting based on what they have experienced during while they were teenagers. Mental health issues, behavioral issues like aggressiveness, all right, which is difficult for them to relate. People do not understand them. Nobody will come and understand that, oh, this is what you've gone through. This is what you've gone through. So, parents, I'm just bringing it to you. That's why I'm not giving you a solution. I'm bringing it to you so that you can reflect on it. Think about it. Do you have inner child wounds? Does your child already have inner child wounds a lot of the time, which is inflicted by you? All right. So I want you to think about it today. Today is a day of pondering. Think about it. And let's see again tomorrow as we talk about, as we take on another challenge. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye, everyone.